So I'm welcome on board Marjan Grootveld, research data expert, team leader at DANS, and Lidia Borrell-Damian from Science Europe. So Marjan, who will be guiding the discussion, has been a coach for many years at research data in the Netherlands. She's behind the synchronization force of FAIRsFAIR and acts as a reviewer for many untrusted digital repositories. While our guest, Lidia Borrell-Damian, has been the Secretary General of Science Europe since 2019. She was also a member of the EOSC Executive Committee and co-chair of its Sustainability Working Group. So Marjan and Lidia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and welcome Lidia as well from me, and welcome all our other guests. So it's not very usual that we sit so nicely on the same couch in the same room with the same background. And as Sarah already said, we do have different backgrounds. In reality, I mean, you are a chemist, I come from computational linguistics, but more important today and for our guests is that you are Secretary General of Science Europe. And maybe I should start asking you to briefly introduce that, because I'm not sure if all our guests are familiar with it.
Sure, thank you, Marjan. And I would like to thank the organizers of the FAIRsFAIR project to have invited me to this event. And I am very happy to see so many participants connected, and also the colleagues that have spoken before me. And yeah, Science Europe is an organization, is a stakeholder organization composed of 38 members. They are national funders and performers. Right? So we have a majority of funders and a minority of performers, but it is true that our organization is set and welcomes both types of organizations as long as they are national. That's perhaps the main angle. So in that sense, when we tackle the issue of policies for research, we always have that national/European angle, because precisely what we try to do is to build alignment where is possible, linking with the previous question.
Yeah, thank you. In the past few years, FAIRsFAIR and Science Europe have collaborated on a couple of topics, or at least we know from one another what we're working on, and we try to be complementary. And I think it's good to start with a couple of the practical guides that people may know from Science Europe.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to add my congratulations to the FAIRsFAIR project. And in fact, it's very, very satisfactory for me, because at the time that FAIRsFAIR was prepared and started, I was working at the European University Association. So I helped building this project. So I'm very happy that it is coming up very nicely with very important and interesting conclusions. So in parallel to the FAIRsFAIR, because more or less has been in parallel in time, indeed in Science Europe we have developed two major guidelines for the sector. One is regarding the guidelines, we call it international guidelines for the alignment on research data management plans. You can see in those guidelines, maybe I can share my very quickly in the chat, if you like, the guidelines that I am going to talk about. There you go. So these are international guidelines that include, let's say, strategic, if you like, or general guides for data management plans, what should be in it, for the selection of trustworthy repositories, for researchers, how researchers should go about drafting management plans, and importantly, since 1 year ago, guidance for reviewers of research data management plans. So how our guidelines are quite comprehensive, in the sense that beyond Science Europe members, we have also involved universities, research infrastructures, and other stakeholders. So it is not just a Science Europe guideline. It is a guideline that intends to approach the challenges of drafting research data management plans overall, and provide guides for the different actors in the research process. Another guideline that we published in June last year as well, and that I am also putting into the chat. It's a guideline for a practical guide for sustainable research data. Mm-hmm. And this guideline includes a number of factors that contribute to the sustainability of research data. In fact, there are 6 main factors that were identified. Was the institutional commitment and organizational engagement, the policy environment, very important, linking also to the previous conversation, financial aspects, of course, training, technical preparedness, and communication and awareness raising. Again, these 6 factors were identified by Science Europe members together with universities and together with research infrastructures, with the aim also to provide an overarching view that could be useful for the 3 types of organizations. And around these 6 topics, there are developed 3 matrices, each for each type of our organization, funder, performer, infrastructure, where they can see in different levels of a stage of development towards sustainable research data. I think that these guidelines provide very good framework, because they are kind of strategic, if you like, for others or for us as well in the future to develop further actions, as it has been the case of FAIRsFAIR. I think one of your deliverables is building on this and on these guidelines precisely. And we are very happy about that, because that is precisely what we aim with this type of alignment of guidelines, is that they are useful then for other guidelines for the sectors, or more focused, or for disciplines. So that's what we aim with these more overarching guidelines.
Yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned that, because when I look at the maturity levels or matrices in your sustainability deliverable, in FAIRsFAIR, we have been working, and we are still working actually, on another maturity approach, in particular for the research performing organizations, universities and so on. And it is open for review. So let me share your example of putting in some links in the chat. It is, we hope, complementary to what you've been developing, a little bit more in detailed level, partly other topics. So we have, for instance, also a topic about curating data and interoperability. Mm-hmm. So it would be nice if these 2 guides could go hand in hand in the near future.
Yes, and we are in conversations with colleagues of yours for that to happen. So I think this is a great complementarity here.
Good to hear. And yeah, it would be interesting to hear also from others when you used the comment option in Zenodo, how that could work and how you could use it. And what you mentioned about the data management planning support, what I really like on your website and on your approach is that you also link to third-party tools. So it's not just your guide, but on the website actually there is the information, the pointer to other tools. And of course we are happy to see that you also mentioned the FAIR-Aware tool, a very straightforward tool to assess one's awareness. The direct link is now in the chat as well. So this is a good way to collaborate, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Maybe picking up on a topic that was also raised or occurred in a previous conversation between Kevin and Alexander, openness and fairness. For Science Europe, open science is strategic now in your strategy for the next years. Maybe you tell us a bit about the plans there.
Sure. Yes. Well, open science is indeed a strategic goal in Science Europe, because we believe all of our members are dealing with public funds, so it's science publicly funded. So we believe that based on that angle, science should be open. Science generated through the use of these funds should be open, because all of our members, and not only because they are members, is the mission, their missions is to serve the public, is to serve society at large. So the best way to do that is by open science. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is also that currently, with this super interconnected world we have, all those challenges that are local become common and in a way global. So it is very important that we can develop more and more interdisciplinary research. And you can only do that by making results very accessible to all. So a neurologist can link up with a historian in a very easy way to go for a study that needs both expertise. You see, there should be a free flow of information, of high quality scientific information for science to contribute truly to society. So that's why open science is a strategic goal.
Yeah, and I can imagine that FAIR plays an important part, and the discrepancy, or at least the non-identity of these two terms, was already discussed previously. But what also triggered in me is, well, it is one of my hobby horses, to be honest with you. It's the topic of reuse. So there is a lot of effort and intelligence and budgets put towards open science and FAIR. FAIR research output, not just FAIR data, but all kinds of outputs actually. And that amount is daunting. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So how about not just reusability or, let's say, a Creative Commons Zero waiver, but the actual research teams who actually reuse existing data. So how can we move from reusability onto the reuse? And when I put my concern or slight worry in a negative sense, what if we build all of this and no one comes? So it's not just making FAIR, it's also using FAIR and using open data. How can we stimulate that better?
Well, I think here the FAIR principles should go together with the quality of the service, the quality of the curation of the data, the reproducibility of the data. As long as the data stored would be of good quality, reliable, recognizable, and author recognizable, that's also important. I think that these are a stimulus for people to reuse existing data. I don't think that there is a preconceived aversion to reuse data, but maybe something that builds in upon bad experience. You go happily to try and reuse some data, and you find that data is not usable enough, that there's lacks that you don't know, or holes that you don't know how to fill in. So I think that that's why setting up standards is so important, because then the more you can build these data storage standards, availability of data, the more you can inspire researchers to go and reuse that data. So it's a little bit of a circle, but we need to kind of break it and stop and make sure that the data is of good quality. It is a different issue if it is used or not, because of the interest that has in the scientific community. For that, you need different type of stimulus, because that you need to wonder why this data that supposedly is good is not reused. So that is a more thematic approach. It's a matter of more thematic priorities rather than something linked to a technical aspect of the data available.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's more in the cultural area to some extent than in the technical area. And then, of course, I would hope that funders and other stakeholders help us to overcome the cultural barriers. And yeah, the lack of trust in those data, indeed. I think we need to be aware of time. Sarah, I think
we have actually a very nice discussion going on in the chat. So maybe we can use the last 5 minutes to pick up some of the comments in the discussion, which is very delicate, I think, because connects all the discussion about fair approaches actually to a fair, not capitalized, approach which deals with respect of competencies, skills, and how can we help younger generations and anyhow staff being fair while at the same time matching this with their career. So I invite anybody who wants to maybe take the microphone and ask for audio rights and intervene. So we had comments from Claire Viney. And yeah, I see Nicholas Zimmer.
Hello, I'm joining from my mobile phone, so please forgive me if the sound is not so great. I've been listening with great interest. Thank you very, very much. I just wanted to make one small contribution, which is, on this topic of the sort of value proposition. I find that we are often fighting an uphill battle against those sort of for-profit service providers. Let's say, for example, FAIRsFAIR with a product like Mendeley Data, who sort of can really drive a very individually tailored value proposition in a sort of very money-driven and value-driven hard way to individual researchers and also individual administrators at institutions, who then become gatekeepers in a very difficult to address way for those of us who might be following a different ethic, like the one that's the spirit of the discussion today. So I know I'm probably putting my foot in it. I know there's probably someone listening here and saying, here goes Nicholas again about about the evil big corporations, but I think there are also enough other people publishing on this issue and advocating around this issue. But I just want to say it's very, very difficult in this kind of unevenly balanced warfare, sort of what's the word that I'm looking for? But basically, we're up against giants who know how to derive value out of packaging possible outputs that come back. The reuse is mentioned, and metrics, user metrics and reuse metrics are mentioned. We're sometimes stumped because we work in these very distributed systems. Universities are usually very composite and driven by lots and lots of different motivations, and they're not very profit oriented, and they're definitely not efficient. So that's, I think that's something that I wanted to throw into the mix, is the sort of inherent inefficiency of a university administrative system compared to a multinational corporation publisher.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Yes, I mean, of course, I recognize very well what Nicholas said. I think that is something that here in Europe, the European Open Science Cloud is trying to provide a solution to be able to link up all these repositories, existing public repositories, public data providers, even private data providers, through this portal that is supposed to be of great help to be able to share data, and as we discussed at the beginning of our conversation, not just data but research outputs in an open way. I think that is an effort that we really must insist on achieving. I would like to join the enthusiastic opening speech that says that we can only achieve that if we all act together. And I really think that despite the problems we run to, I think that this has to be a true joint effort from the scientific community. We must not give up. And even if we think we are fighting against giants, it doesn't matter. We just need to continue providing the best tools for researchers to do their work the best way possible. Quality of data is essential, and I think we should focus on that, the quality of the data, what elements define the quality of the data, and make it fair and make it available and as open as possible, and only close it when it's necessary.
Thanks, Lidia. And before we break, I'd like Françoise to intervene. Yeah?
Yes, now I can.
Yes.
Sorry, you enabled me to talk. Thank you. So I would like to insist on something. I am an astronomer, and we have been sharing and reusing data for many years now. And I think that it worked because we always had the needs of the scientists in mind, how they will reuse the data, which means that we thought all the time how the data has to be described. We defined the format, we thought about metadata with in mind the way the researchers will look for the data and will reuse it. And also another of the key aspects has been that we have been providing tools to reuse the data, to use the data. A good way to find it, which is okay with it, which is aligned with the way the scientists think about the data, the data they will need, let's say, and also tools to reuse the data, to combine the data, and so on. And interoperability has been, in many cases in FAIR, the I is not the thing people do first, because it's very difficult. But in our case, where we need to combine data from different instruments or different times, for instance, it's absolutely key to provide interoperability. And when you do it, fulfilling the research needs, so this means you need researchers to be involved in thinking about the metadata, the formats, and so on and so forth, and the tools. When you do that, the data is massively reused. So this is to go on with what Marjan concerned about what happens if the data is not reused. I think if it is done with in mind what the researchers will look for their own research, you have a chance that you don't work for nothing.
Thank you, Françoise, for sharing this good idea. Yeah, much appreciated.
Thank you, Françoise. Thank you, Marjan, Lidia, and thank you all to the speakers of this first part of the event.